another question that I kind of got from hearing that, because we keep talking about kind of inflation, we keep talking about a kind of vast amounts of money that are required for MMT to work or get closer to working even. And we, especially in kind of the developed world, in underdeveloped countries, we kind of hear about how they try to overprint money and then it causes hyperinflation. So it seems like this idea can't even start to work in countries like that. So I was wondering, Tom, can you kind of explain how much MMT actually depends on the wealth of the country, and especially in the context of the US? And is it something that most other countries can't even get to the point of attempting to do?
Yeah, I think this is a very important point. And Tony explained that MMT, as a theory, owes a lot to Keynesianism, and Keynesian measures were applied in the 1930s. They certainly alleviated the crisis, like in the US, the New Deal. They literally, the state put millions of people to work, but they didn't solve the crisis. And then there was, of course, the post-war application of Keynesianism, but the basis for doing that today does not exist for kind of extensive, quote unquote, welfare states, which were possible given a massive expansion of capitalism after of the capitalist economy after World War II. So I'm going to, it was already referenced how Tony's article is on the international website, but it's also in the journal Socialist World, which is both, it's a joint production now of the US section of ISA and the international, and can be purchased online. But so this is, I'm just going to quote from Tony. He says, MMT's policies require monetary sovereignty, a list of sovereign privileges, which include full control over currency issuance, tax collection, debt issuance, and the ability to float exchange rates. And, those are things that the US has and some other very rich countries, but the vast majority of countries do not have, current monetary, quote unquote, monetary sovereignty, for example. And as Trotsky said in the 1930s, in relation to the New Deal policies, he said this was an American policy par excellence, that the US could do this with its reserves and with its economically relatively dominant position, but it was not a set of policies available to many other countries, most other countries. So I think the same point really applies today. And, this point about hyperinflation, this is actually what's happened in Lebanon, where you had, you have massive corruption. Of course, they had the explosion in the port, a banking crisis connected to this corruption, and the result being, complete devaluation of the currency and hyperinflation, leading to really mass destitution. And this could be the fate of a number of countries in the next period. Whereas the US, by contrast, with the dollar is still the main reserve currency in the world. And the US has the ability, as we have seen, to print the money, to massively expand its national debt so far without major consequence. But even there, I think we have to put in a couple of caveats. The policies that have been implemented over the last year and a half are based on historically low interest rates, even negative interest rates, and historically low inflation. And it relates to what Tony was talking about, overproduction in the world economy. If anything, the situation in the world economy is generally deflationary, which is a whole other danger that actually really took hold in the 1930s. But the idea that this kind of situation, it can last indefinitely, which is what underpins in a sense, the MMT idea, is just, there's no historical basis for that. And we could have a bout of inflation, as I said earlier, even this year. And I think the other point to make about these type of policies, again, as Tony said, like the idea that the capitalist state can be just turned into, a mechanism for constant social spending while still preserving capitalism, just misses certain fundamental aspects of how capitalism works. And again, in the 1930s, you had, the New Deal, but then in the middle of the 30s, they went for austerity policies, and none of the things that they're doing right now with stimulus are meant to be a long term. In fact, there's not a single thing in that massive stimulus bill that is a long-term gain for working people in the US. And the bill is going to come due. So yes, for most parts of the world, they can't even try this stuff, and they're in a much worse position, relatively speaking. In fact, even the IMF admits that, it's going to be, even by 2024, the poorer countries will still be 4% behind what they would have been projected to be, in terms of the size of their economy. But even in the wealthy countries, there's a bill that's going to come due for the massive spending, and they're going to try, as they always do, to make the working class pay for the crisis of their system.